Good afternoon. This is William Clark from the Last Stand podcast. Today I want to talk to you about, first of all, hello, and this is my third podcast of the series where I'm going to be covering all 14 of my novels that I've written, with an emphasis on making sure, or at least trying to make sure, that at least somebody out there within the age group demographics that I'm at will take the leap forward and start writing down a story or their story in a novel form. Remember what I said before in the last two podcasts. I'll give you some examples. It's not hard to do if you have something to say and you've researched your subject matter of what you want to say thoroughly. Average novel length, 40,000 words, 10 to 15 chapters, 10 pages per chapter, double-sided. And before you know it, you've got a novel. But what I want to talk about first today is the first novel that I got published. This is 2013, and my wife Terry helped me do it as far as getting the format going with KDP and Amazon, self-publishing. And the first book I wrote in depth that got any real traction as far as reviews and people liking it was An Honorable Endeavor. I don't know if you can see it or not. An Honorable Endeavor by William Clark. It's well over 40,000 words, and it took me about a year to write it. And what it basically is about, it's about Vietnam veterans returning to Vietnam as a hands across the sea kind of thing, whereas they're going there to kind of a reconciliation thing well after the war, which was done a lot after the Vietnam War. Americans going back and talking to their former enemies and this kind of thing. But what they discovered, this group, when they go back to Vietnam, back in the 90s, early 90s, is that they come across somebody who was, let's say, left behind. Now, we know that there are over 1,000 unaccounted for soldiers in the Vietnam War that are still unaccounted for. POWs, mass casualty events, artillery, dispersals of human beings missing. Well, this story, Honorable Endeavor, is about this group of individuals who go back to Vietnam. They're going to excavate kind of a hands across the sea crash site of an aircraft. And they're going to look for dog tags and remains as kind of a closure thing for families back in the United States who have these missing individuals from the war. Well, when this group goes back, they discover that a soldier is telling them or leading them to the fact that there are POWs left behind, and it's an adventure story about them trying to find them and how they all get wrapped up in it. A little background about myself as far as this demographic and this age period goes. I was too young for the Vietnam War. I went in the Army in 73. Vietnam was already winding down. By 75. That's when the pullout started and it was over. My military time missed the Vietnam War. But what I got, early inspiration about this book, this is way before I even started writing, is that all the individuals that were in my unit, I was with the 82nd Airborne Division, combat of arms. Most, if not all, of the NCOs that were in the Army in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, were Vietnam veterans. They had right combat patches on, CIBs. And collectively, there was a general sense of sadness in these individuals. I noticed that as they're my NCOs. Many of them were E5s, E6s, E7s. And they didn't like to talk about the war. And when they did talk about it, there was a pervasive sense of sadness. And you could see it in their faces when they did talk about it, that there was a profound sense of loss. They had lost something by being involved in that conflict. They're proud of what they did. They served their country admirably, but they felt a deep, pervasive sense of loss in their soul. And it came across when I met these NCOs and worked with them, and they were my bosses while I was in the military early. What I picked up from, I stored that information from these individuals. I was extremely curious about their experiences in Vietnam, and as a soldier serving with them as one of their privates or one of their Spec Force, I would ask them and talk to them about their experiences. I don't know why I was so fascinated by it, but in hindsight now, I know why. I was building up an information base to be able to write about these individuals with an air towards correctness and not sensationalism. The Vietnam veteran has gotten a stereotypical bad rap. For some reason, the press or the media or society in general tends to paint the Vietnam veteran as some drug-addled malcontent with a beard and hippie beads. That can't be further from the truth. The individuals that I served with were highly professional, very well trained, very well centered, but individuals who had endured a horrific year or 2 or 3 tours in Vietnam. They were deeply scarred, deeply bothered, and most, if not all, carry that same trauma to this day. My point of telling you all this is that in this book, Honorable Endeavor, which was my first novel that I got published, I really went after the true temperament of Vietnam veterans who would return to Vietnam years after the conflict, and how close to the surface of their soul going back would bring all these memories back, would bring all this angst, all this fear, all this confusion, all this anger, how it would bring it back. And yet, how would these individuals who were now back in Vietnam in the early 90s doing a recovery on this aircraft, how would they conceptualize their place on the planet now? How would they feel? And what I did to make this book, to write this book, is I drew on those interviews and those basically casual talks with real Vietnam veterans who had just got back and who were now still in the service and were trying to find their way. It's really amazing that when these individuals came back, and they're still in the military, it's in the 70s, early 70s, there was no more mission. These were the Carter years, horrible for the military. I can remember being at Fort Stewart, Georgia, with the 1st 75th Ranger Battalion, and I was standing. I was with the 1st 75th, and I was standing in the chow line. And I remember we were all in line. All these Rangers were standing in line, getting ready to go into the chow hall. And these buses pulled up out front, out on the highway, on the road there. It was 3 buses. We're all standing there. We're thinking, we're all in uniform. We're all thinking, okay, what? Somebody important showing up. And all these individuals started getting off the bus, with long hair, beards, scruffy, carrying little knapsacks, and just not a really squared away bunch of people got off that bus. And they started walking towards the chow line. We're thinking, okay, this is something you don't see every day. And there was a civilian who carried himself like he was a police officer. I can't explain it, but he moved like he was in charge of this group. And they walked up to the chow line, and they all went in ahead of us. There must have been 30 of them. Well, you got a bunch of Rangers standing out in the hot sun waiting to get lunch, and a bunch of scraggly civilians walk ahead of you in the chow line. It's going to cause a problem. I guarantee it. Somebody's going to say something. Somebody's going to do something. And we did. Come to find out, after the scuffles broke up, it was great. After the conversation stopped, we found out these were draft dodgers that Carter had given amnesty to come back to the United States and face whatever they were going to face. But some genius politician somewhere thought, you know what? It'd be a good idea if we just stop off in Fort Stewart, Georgia. And by the way, these guys need lunch. Let's go to the Ranger Battalion and let them cut in line in the chow line and feed these guys lunch. You can picture the scenario in your head of what happened that afternoon. I was there, and it was fun. I digress. My point is that many of the soldiers that were with me standing in that chow line at that time were returned Vietnam veterans, combat patch, CIB. We were all jealous of that because we didn't have any CIBs. We didn't have a right side combat patch. A lot of us had EIBs, which is the Expert Infantry Badge. You don't get it for being in combat. You get it for taking classes. And we were jealous of that. Even though that they didn't serve as Rangers in Vietnam, they were Ranger qualified, and they were with LRP units, and they were with stand-up Ranger units in country. Well, anyway, those of us who were not in Vietnam, but who were still serving with Vietnam veterans, were very protective in a weird kind of way of our Vietnam veterans, of the older guys, the guys who've been in the jungle, the guys who've been face-to-face with the VC, been nose-to-nose with the NVA. We were protective, and we were jealous of what they had accomplished and what they had done. I had a lot of pride in serving with Vietnam veterans. Some of the finest soldiers I've ever known. They had this primal knowledge of close conflict and war. The jungle would be a terrible place to fight an armed conflict. I had gone through jungle expert training in Panama with the 82nd Airborne Division while I was with the 82nd. And I spent 2.5 weeks in the jungles in Panama doing mock warfare, stream crossings, night raids, all this stuff. I can't imagine doing that with live ammo against an entrenched, highly skilled unit against you for a year and survive. The heat, the bugs, the booby traps, the non-compliant civilian population that could give a rat's butt if you live or die. You're an invader, and no matter how many sea rations you give them out, or how many pieces of chocolate you give the kids, or how much rice you make sure they get, they still consider you an invader and care nothing about your safety or your family or you trying to get back home at the end of 12 months. I can't imagine going through that for a year. Now, I'm talking about the combat soldiers in Vietnam, not the administrative guys who were back at Cam Ranh or whatever. I respect them. I respect that because they got mortared, they got rocketed. It happened. But my heart and my soul reaches out to that grunt, that 4th Division, that Big Red One, that 173rd Herd or 7th Cav grunt, 11 Bravo, that's out there in that bush, living out of his rucksack, day in and day out, walking those trails, walking those patrols, just waiting for that hot one to hit him. My heart goes out to those guys. I was in Iraq. Iraq was, unless you were in, an urban area, was a standoff conflict. You could actually see maybe or hear, or at least had a direction where the bad guys were at. Don't get me wrong, urban warfare is horrible as hell. But in Vietnam, for the grunt now, it was close quarter stuff. Guy could be 8 feet away from you in the bush with an AK-47. You wouldn't see him because the jungle's too thick. And when you did see him, you already been hit or you already been wounded. It was horrible. My point is, I recognized that for what it was when I was in the Army with those guys. And I kept it. So when I wrote An Honorable Endeavor, I put the spirit of that sacrifice and the spirit of that conflict into my characters. I remembered it. I kept it. Now, I had no idea when I was in the military 150 years ago that I would be a writer. But yet I stored that information. And what I'm saying to you is that you have done the same thing on other subjects. You have stored information that was important to you. You've taken it into your system and you've kept it. And sometimes you use it for motivation. Sometimes you use it for inspiration. Sometimes you use it for an excuse to get mad. My point is, all of us have that storage house of important information in our system. The reason for these podcasts is to encourage writers. Please do not get sucked into the idea that the only thing that's going to write books is a computer, is a desperate voice somewhere in the ether that cares nothing about you or your stories, but has a grasp on the worldwide knowledge of language, is going to write that heartfelt story. They're not going to write a story that captures the terror and the hopelessness and the fear of a 19-year-old kid walking a mountain path in Pleiku, knowing that an NVA regiment or a company or a squad is just out of the woodline. There's no way to capture that by a machine. A human soul has to infuse those kind of emotions and those kind of things into the story. I honestly believe, through the reviews and through people talking to me, that Honorable Endeavor captures that. I don't want this to be a self-aggrandizement of me, per se, but I cherish the stories that I heard and the sincerity that I felt from the Vietnam veterans that I served with while I was in the military. And I tried really hard, and I worked really hard, and I was committed to the fact of getting those feelings into my characters of An Honorable Endeavor. So, with that, the book is An Honorable Endeavor by William Clark. That's my picture right there. That's in a rack, by the way. It's at Amazon Books right now. It's got great reviews. It's also on audiobooks. A very, very, very talented guy by the name of Stephen Hollywood did an ebook on this, and it's fantastic. That's also at Amazon Books. I just want to encourage you guys to do this. Don't be turned off by the idea that computers are going to write novels from now on. Now, they're machines. Humans write human stories. You're a human being. Hang on to that bit of humanity. Tell a story. Bring up the memories of whatever you've been told. Open that box in your soul where all those really great inspirations and enlightenments stay or are hidden until needed. They're needed now. Start a book. Start a novel. Start getting outline. Get your characters out. As I've said in the other two videos, this is my number 3, rely on that because those emotions won't let you down, especially if you put them into print and you put them into a character that people can relate to. That's all I got right now. I just wanted to go over An Honorable Endeavor, let you know where it came from me. And I'm going to give you the same thing I always give everybody on these podcasts. If you like what you hear, please subscribe. give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. You can't hurt me. You can only make my day, make me smile if you like what I have to say to you. And if I can inspire you, perfect. Like I always say, if you can't be safe, be sanitary. William Clark out.